because if a person is having resistance to taking an action, there's misalignment there.
Makes
So
sense.
instead of focusing on coaching the specific action, I focus on the mental operating system that runs the action.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast, where I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. I'm Sue Saller, and I'm excited to be your host on this journey. I'll be bringing you inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert advice to help you overcome obstacles, set and achieve your goals, and live the life you've always wanted. Together, we'll discover that making small changes is not only possible, but can lead to big results. Join me now as we explore the power of positive thinking, the art of goal setting, and strategies for success. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. For those of you who are familiar with Jason, you know he's an amazing individual with the ability to shift your mindset with a process he calls frame shifting and the power of his words. However, you're in for a different kind of podcast interview because not only does Jason talk about what he does, he gets into who he is and how he got to where he is today. So enjoy this special episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. Jason, welcome. So I'm so glad you're here. I've been looking forward to doing this. So for those out there of my audience who does not know you, I'm going to introduce you. So my special guest today is Jason Drees. Prior to being a coach, Jason worked in the tech industry at a very nice, comfortable W-2 job, making a decent salary, but he realized that his life had a greater calling as a personal coach. He mastered the process of helping clients into alignment and just went to push high performers like Brandon Turner, of which his story is amazing, by the way, to their limits and past their comfort zones to catapult their success. So, and Jason is also the founder and now CEO of Jason Drees Coaching and the author of a phenomenal book that I read and we are going to dig into later called Do the Impossible. Jason, are you ready to do, well, this isn't very impossible, but you're ready to do the possible podcast?
I am ready to do the possible pod. Let's have an impossible conversation. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have I love impossible conversations. Let's go deep. And I just want to tell you too, I love to bring on guests that I know are going to add value to the lives of those that listen. So I have full confidence in the fact that this podcast is already going to be epic. And I believe that anybody listening is going to walk away transformed in some capacity. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do this. All
Yes.
right. So first thing, I want to jump into who you were before you became a coach, a little bit about your childhood and early adult years, because I really feel like they play a transformative part in your life that led you to who you are today.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It was the path I took to get here. Sure. So what specifically are you asking?
Well, you know what? In the book, you mentioned that when you were a child, you realized that there was something different about you, so that you were born like highly empathetic and intuitive. So, which means like you're innately in tune with reading emotions from other people. So, how did that play out through childhood?
Right. I think a lot of the childhood I was like, it was more of noticing that I was different than other people. I noticed that when I was a child, my dad would call me sensitive, and it wasn't really, and I just didn't think a ton of it at the time, as a kid, I really didn't. I think it started to more come out like, I think the real empathic and dealing into other people's feelings really started to come up like after high school. Like after high school, I just started partying. Like I went to college and I probably shouldn't even went. I was there 3 years at Cal Poly and I was still a freshman, right? I just didn't go. So as I was partying and drinking all the time, I'd say for probably the first 2 years after college, I was probably drunk 6 nights a week, if not 7. Because there was a lot of stuff I was done and numbing at that time. And like, I would say alcoholism was in my family. It was like a part of it, like a drinking. So I wasn't seen as an outcast. I was seen as, oh, it's normal. That's what you do. And so that part of being empathic to other people, I didn't really quite understand. And it just, I felt a lot and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know how to manage it. And it wasn't until, from a personal side, it wasn't until probably my divorce in 2005 or 6 that I really started to get some input on that. I started doing Tony Robbins stuff and personal powers audio systems in early 2000s. but I didn't quite make that connection. And it wasn't till I had a therapist I was working with after my divorce that she was helping me understand that what empathy was, how I do this, and basically how I ground and keep other people's energy away. The funny thing is this, the girlfriend I was dating, the woman I was dating at the time, I was seeing a therapist, and she asked her therapist for referral and gave me a list of 3, and I picked one. And the one I picked was actually metaphysically trained at the Berkeley Psychic Institute.
Oh, wow.
So she taught me a lot about energy. And that was one of the first times that I had this conversation with her. And I said, I'm scared of my own power because I feel like I have a role to play in the lifting of the consciousness of the planet.
Wow.
I said that in a session in 2006. And I was like, where did that come from? Right. So it was the part of like really starting to embrace me and who I am. And that's kind of where it started. As far as in business, I just like making money, so I wanted to make money. So I took the jobs I could make to make money. I was going to, after high school, I didn't really know where to go. So I went to Cal Poly Pomona, which was like a drive from my house. And I just picked a major, this one, and kind of didn't, engineering, because I'm good at math and science and my uncles are all engineers. So I'm like, and that didn't work, and I basically dropped out after the 3rd year, went into sales and was in sales and did pretty well for the next like 10 years. That's basically kind of where I went.
What did you sell?
Technology stuff. Yeah.
Wow. And then at some point you're like, I've got this other side of me that is not it's not sales. So what like, can you talk a little bit about the transition then? Like at some point your sales job after 10 years, you're like, this isn't
Well,
doing it. Where did the coaching come in?
it actually starts before that,
Hmm.
because it was nothing. Everything shifted when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. That changed everything. And I would probably say I haven't had a weekend off since I've read that book, because that turned me loose, made me crazy. And that was 2003. So, because prior to that, I was working for the weekend and I was making 120 grand a year. I was married, no kids. We had money. It was fun. Like just party, have fun, go do stuff like that. Right. But I always wanted more, but that kind of was like the match, that the spark that shifted everything. And then I started looking for other businesses and entrepreneurs, and I looked in real estate investing. I looked at these courses. I never actually took any action in real estate investing in that time, but it was years before I figured out which direction to start a business.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. And then at some point, how did you know that going into personal coaching was your lane to get into then?
Well, it was a while. So in
Okay.
2000, from 2005 to 2009, I worked at a tech company called Avaya, which used to be part of Lucent Technologies. And they basically do phone systems for businesses. And I was the territory sales manager, and my buddy was a territory sales engineer. And we would hang out all the time because we were working together. And he was into professional racing, and we discovered this product called the Cool Shirt, and we found Peltier thermoelectric coolers. So we had this desire to manufacture an ice-free driver cooling system, because you go up to a race car that is $1 million race car, and you look inside it, and you'd see an ice chest with a bilge pump in it, like a literally off-the-shelf ice chest with a bilge pump pumping to a T-shirt that's got tubes sewn on the outside of it. And I'm like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So we basically started experimenting with Peltier thermoelectric coolers, which is an electric device, and trying to make that cool water. And then we developed our own shirt. So basically, we started developing a race car driver cooling systems and shirts. And that was in 2008, 2009. We raised some money. I raised like $250,000 to do that.
Yeah.
We made a really cool shirt that was made of like these custom molded camelback bladders. So there was no pressure points. And we never really got the thing to work efficiently because it was pulling way too much power in the car. But I had, somewhere along the way, I had filled out something from Tony Robbins, and I got a card in the mailer. It says free strategy session. And I booked a free strategy session, and I had it. And she's like, well, I'm like, it was amazing. So I hired a Tony Robbins coach, and that was to help me run that business.
Mm.
And then a year later, I had stopped coaching. I went to a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within. I saw my coach there. I got back into coaching. And during that next contract, during one call, he asked me, have you ever thought about becoming a coach?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And when I got asked that question, it was like I got struck by lightning. It was like my life had purpose. Like really, was the first time I had purpose in my life. And I decided in that moment I was going to become a coach however long it took. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love the story. That's great. And the
Yeah.
little background with all the shirts and everything in there too. That's so cool because a lot of times we hear
Yeah.
people's stories. It's like you wonder how they got from point A to point B. So I appreciate you sharing that.
You're
So let's,
welcome.
yeah, I just learned a little bit more, Jason. And so did the rest of us who's listening. That's cool. I'll always remember the shirt story. So let's talk about coaching. So there's no shortage of personal coaches out there, right? There's like
No.
tons, there's no shortage. And self help information, same thing. There's just a ton out there. Take some time and talk about specifically what your coaching looks like and what makes it different than what's out there.
Well, what I do is I started as a results coach. I was trained as a Tony Robbins results coach. And it was shortly after, it was less than a year after starting working for Tony Robbins, I started to develop my own coaching style. Like,
Mm,
and results coaching is what most life coaches, business coaches are using as a results coaching, where they focus on the result and they focus on the actions to achieve the result. And that type of coaching works to a certain extent. A lot of times, what's actually happening is you're forcing misaligned action using leverage, such as negative leverage. Like I'd talk to a client and say, well, how do you grow your real estate business? And they'd say, well, I need to do cold calls to find an off market deal. And I'm like, okay, go cold call. And the client would say, I don't like cold calling. And I would
mm.
say, what kind of man are you going to be? What? Oh, don't you have a 2-year-old? What is your son going to think of his dad who doesn't pick up the phone? So I would like use negative leverage to force action. So some people think when action isn't happening, it's because the purpose isn't there. So they crank up purpose to get the action going. And that's one form. And that's pretty much how everybody coaches. What I've discovered is that when you coach with an alignment coaching, then the action becomes automatic. Because if a person is having resistance to taking an action, there's misalignment there.
Makes
So
sense.
instead of focusing on coaching the specific action, I focus on the mental operating system that runs the action. So it's almost like what's more important, environment or action? So that's what alignment coaching is. And I'm actually kind of stretched to call myself a coach these days because what I do is so different that it's not even the same as what other coaches do.
Yeah, that's why I asked
Yeah.
because it's not. Yeah, I've been to, oh, I can't tell you how many countless Monday morning resets that you have. And
Yeah.
they really do. There's something amazing about that when you enter that room
Yeah.
and you start breathing and you start listening and just basically just forcing yourself to stop and pause, especially if you're completely present. You stop and pause and you think about where you're at that moment and you actually can train your brain to determine whether or not you're aligned with that moment or you're not. And for somebody who hasn't experienced it, it is somewhat difficult to explain. At least I'm having a tough time explaining it. But when you're in it,
Yeah.
it just like there's just something about it that just resets the body. I mean, it's amazing. So you developed the 60-second mindset process called frame shifting or framing. It allows easy removal of mental roadblocks that
Yeah.
would hold individuals back. So
But it's a different frequency. It's a different frequency.
you want to explain frequency? What you mean?
Well, there's like our bodies are made of atoms, and you can be in a happy vibration where your body is happy and you have happy thoughts, and you can have a sad vibration where you have sad thoughts, right? Like the what I have figured out how to do and what I naturally do is I hold an elevated frequency of consciousness. And when you move into an elevated point of consciousness, you can then take ownership of everything within inside it. Most people are stuck inside their reaction trying to resolve it versus elevating outside of it to change it.
Okay.
And when I'm on the Monday Mindset Reset call, I'm holding a very high frequency alignment. I basically hold this level of alignment. And on those calls, I communicate in ways that allows people to easily match it.
Okay. That makes
So,
sense.
so it's not like traditional coaching where I ask a question and then the client has a breakthrough from the answer. I'm literally setting the frequency and holding the space for the clients to match it. The simple way to describe it is a point of view, right?
Okay.
You can have a point of view as a person who's brand new in their career, or you can talk to a mentor who's been doing it for 50 years and has a radically different point of view. It's the same thing. But the point of view that I am viewing things from is that you can do anything. You can change anything in your life, and everything that's not there, you can change. Like, that's the point of view I operate from. So basically, people get out of their own way and they move past patterns of behavior and thought that are in resistance to what they want, because it's basically a higher frequency. And one of the hardest things I have to do is to explain what I do.
Yeah, I think you're right. To experience it when you actually go into one of those calls, it's just you just flow naturally that it's very difficult to explain. Even I'm having a tough time explaining what you do, but I've experienced it and I've seen it work. So,
Yeah.
and in your book, what I really enjoyed about the book is that you have sections of it that you have these mantras,
Mhm.
and within the mantras, it's like repeat after me. And
Yeah.
the stuff that's repeated is extremely powerful and mind shifting there. I mean, that's all I can say is just buy the book,
Yeah.
because to repeat those things over and over again is it does shift your frame. I actually put them into audio recording and I put music to them and then I listen
Mhm.
to them in the car, and
Nice.
or I listen to them when I'm exercising, and
Mhm.
they really do. I could feel that mind shift. Are you ready to get into alignment is one of them. Are you ready to, are you ready to do the impossible? And
Yeah.
things like impossible is just, it's not impossible, it's just uncommon. I love your
Yeah.
mastery of the English language. Honestly. So because really, I mean, if you think about it, think about the word impossible. When we hear it,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
go, "Oh, well, that's impossible." You throw up your hands in the air and you go, "Well, I can't do that. It's
Yeah.
impossible." But you say, "Well, wait a minute. Impossible is just uncommon."
It's just uncommon
Uncommon.
because
It's just uncommon. It
bec
changes the definition. It makes it more like, "Wait a minute. I think I might be able to do that, even
it
if it's
does.
impossible."
It
Yeah.
does. It does, because language creates our reality. The language in our head that's creating our reality is the language based on our experiences from the past. And that's our biggest limitation. And the thing that I do is I don't help people create success. I don't help them make more money. I don't help them do the impossible. I don't. I help them remove the resistances that are blocking it from occurring.
Do you find that those resistances are usually past words that they've said to themselves that they just have to let go of?
That's part of it, right? It's their beliefs, right? So we're doing something we haven't done before, and the reason it's not happening is because the person may not believe it's possible, or it failed before, or they don't think it's possible. So I basically remove all the resistance to what they want occurring, so it will occur.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because you have a saying, and I'm going to pull this right from the book. It's like,
Mhm.
the past is in the past. It doesn't matter. The present is right now, but what you do in this moment determines your future, not your past. Something like that.
Yeah, the past is not an indicator of the future. The present is not the indicator of the future. The present is a result of the past.
There you go. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But yeah, well, before we dive into the book, can I read you the Amazon review that I left?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, yeah. So here's my Amazon review. Quote, I have read many self-improvement books like Jim Rohn and listened to guys like Ed Milet, and they are great. But once I started reading Do the Impossible, my mind and perspective transformed with every page. Jason's style of writing is so simple yet so profound that you keep reading because you can't stop. One of the best features of this book is that it comes alive at the end of every chapter with his repeat after me mantras. Jason also integrates his personal story like a master storyteller, dropping them in at an appropriate time to drive a point home. I have had the privilege of being interviewed by Jason. He did not know I bought this book, and he is as authentic in person as he is in the book. Don't read this book if you like a boring life. Read it to transform your life. It is as simple as framing.
Thank you. That's awesome.
You're welcome. Every word of it was true. What made you decide to write it?
I was part of the process, you know? It was Part of it was I need to have a book to be taken seriously, and my coaching methodology, that was part of it. But the real so there was a little play there because nobody in my family's written a book before or anything like that. And the funny thing is it's a high frequency book, right? Some people don't get it. The funny thing is, like, I haven't had anybody in my family give me feedback on it. Like nobody in my family said, "Oh my God, I read it." Like tell me, no, like literally crickets, which is so funny. But part of the bigger part of why I wrote it is I don't know why this information comes through me. Like this alignment, this perspective. It's like my discovery of life is like this content is me living my life. I don't know why that comes through me like it does, but I feel almost like the shepherd of it, and it's my job to share it.
Hmm. How did you feel after writing the book?
It felt good. It good actually. When I felt good, and then I felt scared. Actually, I felt scared afterwards.
Why
Yeah,
scared?
I
Unpack
at
that.
first it was like, oh, you wrote the book, and it wasn't really real until I got it until we started to see it in our hands. And the funny thing is, I didn't actually see it in my hand first. One of the people on my coaching team, one of the coaches on my team, had it on a team, got their copy, and they held it up, right. And I was like, I felt scared because I felt exposed.
Mm,
I felt like I was out there.
mhm,
So that part of the process of like embracing my path and what I know is also a path that a lot of people have to go through. But now I'm like proud. I look back at I actually have been listening to the audiobook like for the past 5 days. Every morning I've been listening to it when I was on the treadmill because I needed a refresher, you know.
mhm. Yeah, that's why I did the framing mantras to audio because you do. Like, I just listen to them every couple of days, especially when I need to get in
Yeah.
the zone. Oh, how long did it take you to write that book?
I worked with a writing partner because my skill in writing is not that high, but it probably took us 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard some books take like 3 years, so that's why I was curious to
Yeah. I have
see.
more books. There's more books in my head, so I'm not
There are
trying to
they
figure out what's next, but
What's the next book?
well, I my money book is like 80% done. But
Okay.
I think the money book is changing. The idea behind it has changed. It changed from a simple money book, then it changed into this book called Financially Fearless, and now it's kind of back at this. I think the current version I think is almost like 12 myths about money, something like that.
Oh,
Something
wow.
simple, like 50 pages, like really tight, short.
Mhm.
And then, but I think the next big book is I think the next big one is a book on alignment, about
Mm.
alignment. I think that's the next one.
Oh, I cannot wait for that one.
Yeah.
That would be
And then
great.
and then there's also a book about being an entrepreneur, the mindset journey of an entrepreneur.
Mm,
I have the title for that book. That title, I'm
okay.
excited. The title of that book is called One to Many. Some of my
Mm.
entrepreneur book.
Love
Um,
it. I love it. I'm
so
excited.
over the mindset journey of an entrepreneur, right? Because there's different phases, and most of the clients I work with are entrepreneurs. So
Wow, I bet you there'd be a lot of stories in there too. I
yeah,
love the stories, how they're weaved in, how
yeah,
you use your stories and then weave them in because what happens is it makes the points that you're trying to get across real.
yeah.
So that's what one of the things I really enjoyed. And there were some nights I think I read the book for like 2 hours. I'm like, I can't
That's
put this
awesome.
down yet just because there was so many really cool things in there. So
Yeah,
one of the quotes in the book
mhm,
is life does not reward mediocrity. To
yeah,
win big, you have to play at the level you were destined to play.
yeah.
So, how did you know what level you were destined to play at?
Well, it's are you giving it your all, right? Or are you? Because as a pattern I've seen in myself, and a pattern I've seen with clients in coaching is that if they have a failure or a series of failures, it's easy to have the next thought of aiming smaller. And I've had experiences in my life and experience in my client's life where there was multiple failures. So the end result was aiming smaller to with the target goal of getting a win.
Mm,
And aiming smaller didn't work. And so this aiming smaller and smaller and smaller and nothing works and feeling like a total failure. And I realized that that pattern, that perception that smaller is easier is not actually true. Smaller is just smaller.
mhm,
Whether you're aiming at 1 or 100 or a million, it's just a strategy that executes that. So really it comes down to, you know, how what level you're aiming at, because lately I've actually found myself aiming too small lately too, so I've been adjusting that, because are you focusing on the problem in front of you, or are you focusing on the problem that eliminates the problem in front of you?
mm, okay. Yeah,
So you
well
c- so you can be, because human beings will automatically adapt to the level of the problem. So you can play at the level of the problem. You can play at the level of the solution. You can also play at the level of your full potential. And when we have failures, we can start going down. And that's why I
right,
say life is not going to reward you for doing something that's easy. You need to be at that full potential.
that makes sense. It's like 10x is better than 2x. You might as
100%.
well just keep going. Yeah, I agree. It's just a great quote. Life
Yeah.
doesn't reward mediocrity. And you said even in what you do, nobody's immune. So you teach this stuff all the time and you just realize that wait a minute, you're not you could be playing at the next level too. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sure a coach helps too. If you have a coach
Yeah. Yeah.
to see that. You want to talk a little bit about if somebody comes to you for coaching, what that process would be? Because I know there's people out there that might find that a little intimidating. Like, like maybe I don't need a coach or I don't know what to expect.
Well,
Yeah.
the hiring it surprises me how many people don't have a coach, because it's basically like adding another person on your team who's going to help you be at your best. That's really what coaching is. The process of getting a coach is very simple. You book a call, you get a sample session, and you pick a contract and sign up. Like literally, it's that simple. But I realize a lot of times people that are saying no to coaching aren't saying no to coaching because of the dollar amount or the investment. A lot of times people say no to coaching because they're not ready to give it their all, or they're not ready to play at that level. Because if you go to coaching, you're going to be held accountable. At least Jason Drees coaching. If you go to Jason Drees coaching, you're going to be held accountable to your full potential, and there's no more hiding. And when you start playing at that level and you start at that trajectory, anything from your past that cannot exist at that level will come up for processing. So that thing from your past that you try not to think about or whatever, when you start accelerating, it's going to come up. So some people are like hiding, because coaching will bring out everything. But those that do sign up what people don't realize is that people sign up for coaching or performance coaching to grow their business or make more money. That's where most people are usually coming into our coaching style, because that's our audience. But what actually happens is we balance them out in all areas of their life. The impact is everywhere.
What would your suggestion be to somebody who's not an entrepreneur or they want to be an entrepreneur, they're not there yet, but they're just starting out? Would your coaches be able to help too?
Well, coaches will help them get clarity and focus and action on where they're going. And if you're not an entrepreneur and you want to be one, well, I would start saying you are one. That's the first one, making that reality true.
Right. That
Mhm.
makes sense. In your book, you mentioned that the first 6 years of your coaching were really difficult because you're basically broke and your family,
Yeah.
they were concerned about you.
Yep.
Talk about what continued to propel you not to give up. And I'm sure, did you struggle with having thoughts to go back to your W-2? Or what, talk about that a little bit.
I try. There are multiple times I've looked for a W-2. Now, I did have a W-2 job at Tony Robbins. I was a W-2 employee.
Okay.
And starting out, I was trying to get another tech job. I really was. Multiple times I tried, and I just didn't get it. I didn't want it, but I would have taken it if they were to offer me.
Mm.
And Robbins was a W-2 job. And it was, a big part of the not stopping was the standard of life that I wanted to create for my family. And I knew I was like in my late 30s, early 40s. I didn't have really any savings. And I have three boys on my way to four. Like the only way I'm going to have a decent life for them is to be an entrepreneur, because making 200,000 to 400,000 W-2 is really hard to do. You can have a specialized degree, lawyer, doctor, or you become an executive at someone else's company. But I would never play the political games to be an executive in someone else's company. So it would never happen. So I realized the only way for me to have that, and really it was a driver, and it's still running today, is that while money is the big part of it, what I'm really after is freedom. And I will not stop chasing more freedom until I drop dead.
That's a good goal.
I will not.
That's an awesome goal. It took me a while to wrap my brain around being a W-2 employee versus being an entrepreneur, and I'm actually in that transition zone right now. I'm
Yeah.
moving from W-2 because I realize W-2s, they have ceilings.
Oh, big silence. Big silence.
Big ceiling, like, you can't go over that. That's what you make an hour. You're not going over that unless there's a bonus or there's something else in there, and that hit me very well. It's been hitting me for months now. It's now, transitioning to the next phase of life, realizing, "Wait a minute, that W-2 just isn't gonna work." So, it's when you get bit by that, it's very powerful. So I can see where a coach would come in and also
It
help
is.
with that transition.
And people don't realize how it is, how easy it is to start a business, right? You
Mm.
know, it's can you get 10 people to give you $250 a week? Because if you can get 10 people to give you $250 a week, that's $120,000 a year. It's
Holy
not that
crap,
hard.
I didn't do that math.
It's like
That's
10
great.
people times 250, that's 2,500 a week. 4 weeks, that's 10,000 a month. Like, it's not that hard. There's this perception that entrepreneur it's not that hard. It's ridiculously simple, actually. But most people don't think that way because we're taught to be employees. We're conditioned to be
Right.
employees. But most entrepreneurs would never be great employees for everyone else because
Mhm.
they like doing their own thing. In fact, like out of my 20 years that I've had W-2s, like 89 to 2019, I probably was that 30 years. Holy shit. That was like 30 years. I've only had a 6-month period where I had a fixed salary.
Oh, wow.
Every
Okay.
well, maybe the retail jobs when I first started and I was making $4.75 an hour at the golf. But after that, every job was commission because I could not accept that my salary was limited.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I that's yeah, that's what I'm running into now. Like,
Yeah.
and you know what, reading Rich Dad Poor Dad helped, but then
Mhm.
actually getting around, I joined Emerge, you know about Emerge, the mastermind, and
Mhm.
when I joined that, it was like my whole world blew up. Like, the
Mhm.
scales were taken off my eyes and I realized, "Holy crap, I make nothing and I don't have
Yeah.
to stay here, that I can actually create and do and be limitless." I do wanna talk on this. You also do breathing. When we've been on those coaching calls,
Mhm.
you purposely inhale, you exhale,
Mhm.
and I wanna pull out one section of the book that
Mhm.
literally transformed my brain when I did it. So it goes through this exercise of breathing and then focusing. And I do have a question after it too.
Okay.
One of the most profound moments, okay, was this breathing exercises. So I visualize myself internally. So
Mhm.
you breathe in and you think of inside the body. Then you visualize and you breathe out and you think of yourself occupying the space of like your town or your state, maybe, but just containing it there. You breathe some more. But then the last part was to visualize yourself as an infinite being in the universe.
Mhm. Okay.
And when I did that, I want you to know that it had a profound effect on me that allowed me to start thinking about impossible targets, because
Mhm.
when you picture yourself being unbounded,
Mhm.
then things that are impossible don't seem so impossible. So, talk about why this view of oneself as being an infinite being empowers us to our fullest potential when we embrace the concept.
Well, that expansion exercise is like an expansion of consciousness exercise, and it shifts your point of view, and it's specifically done in a way to change your point of view from your physical point of view to the point of view of the universe. Basically, is what it does
Mm.
because we have no limits. You know, the only limits that we carry around are based on our own unique experience and the beliefs that and experiences we have. So the reason I use those tools, such as, you know, our bodies are made of atoms and things like that, is and the one reason I always use the example of our bodies are made of atoms is because atoms are not solid. They're like pretty much entirely free space. So that type of idea, which everybody knows or they remembers or they believe is true from science, from seventh grade science class, they basically know that's a fact. But
Mhm.
at the same time, the brain can't comprehend it. So the reason that I use those tools is because it allows me to bypass limiting beliefs in the mind and getting them to believe that what they don't think is possible is actually possible. It's one of the fastest ways I get people to be open to the impossible. Because as I started to coach this way over the past like 10 years, getting people to believe this took time. And I have mastered my ability to communicate it in a way where people believe it, but really it's happening because I'm holding myself in an alignment with that being true.
Okay.
So
S-
it's like a frequency, right? There's
Right.
so I, and the words that come out of my mouth actually don't matter actually as much than the frequency I'm holding.
That would make sense.
I'm saying the words I'm saying are 20% of it, and the frequency is
The
80%.
frequency is 80%. Okay.
Yeah, because higher frequency impacts lower frequency.
Okay. Like, you don't have to be in the room with somebody. So you don't have to be in the room with them. You can just be talking to them. So there is an auditory component to getting someone into alignment and having them at the frequency that they need to be at.
It doesn't even have to be auditory.
Okay. Explain that.
I shifted your frequency with a book.
Okay. Point.
So that book contains the frequency is my best effort to articulate that frequency in written format. When I'm talking, and if you follow me on social media, a lot of times I think my social media is hard. It's funny. My social media is not really growing like I think it should be, giving my expertise in what I do. But I also understand that I don't talk in short, condensed bites.
Right.
And for me, and for my process of holding this frequency, it takes me talking for a little bit for it to happen. So capturing that in a 30-second bite is really hard for me to do.
Yeah.
But it's like so what I do naturally is I hold the frequency of alignment. So whoever I'm talking to, whether it's an individual or group, I can hold the alignment that allows them to match it. And by matching it, they overcome their misalignment. And I think the biggest example to prove I'm not really a coach is that I don't give action items at the end of calls. Like, rarely do I do action. The reason being is because when you're fully in alignment, you know what to do. You don't need me to hold you accountable. People will be, I need an accountability coach. Well, I said, that's not me. And they're like, what? You're not accountability? No, because you only need accountability when you're out of alignment. Accountability means you need to be forced to do something you don't want to do.
That makes sense. Oh my gosh, I just realized we have so much accountability. You're accountable to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Well, what if that doesn't serve me to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning? What if getting up at 6 is better and that puts me in a better alignment for my day?
Yep.
It makes sense.
So what you think about what you do is more important than what you do.
Okay. What you think about what you do is more important than what you do. That would make sense as well. So if I'm following you correctly, if I have a thought in my mind and I go, and then somebody says, you got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to bed at midnight, I would say to myself, well, that's not worth it because I'm not going to get enough sleep. I'm only going to get 4 hours of sleep. So that would actually cause misalignment.
Someone else is telling,
somebody else is telling me I'm going to be misaligned. I don't think that that's the thing I should do.
That's someone else's belief from their belief structure. So we always, and then what we add is we end up starting with these rules and conditions that prevent us from getting what we want. Like, this mindset work I'm doing is actually really subtle. It's really subtle. Like, for example, I'll be somebody will have a problem. And I've had this happen in coaching where clients will come and it's like, oh my God, I'm trying to lose weight. I want to lose weight. And then I was struggling for 2 years. And then I found this coach and I read their book and I lost 30 pounds and I felt great, but I realized I wasn't doing everything that they said. So basically they find someone who has solved their problem. They look at the things that the person was doing to solve their problem. And then because they're not doing their things, they think they can't solve the problem. So they end up putting conditions on it. Those conditions that the brain is trying to calculate. Well, in order to get that, I need to do this. So if I'm not doing this, I don't get that. That's the way the brain works. But that's the old reality. We don't have to operate in that frequency anymore. We're now in the frequency where this part doesn't matter. It's only alignment. So the work that I do is removing all of the conditions. Because when you remove all of the conditions, you just get perfect alignment.
And then you can go faster.
And you go faster. And the second that you shift your alignment or your frequency, which I call frame, the second you shift that, you'll start thinking different law. You've had that experience, right? We do a frame shift and you start thinking different thoughts because that's the law of attraction in motion. But most people think the law of attraction is I read that book, The Secret. I watched the movie. I'm like, they didn't tell me what it was. I'm like, I read the whole book. I didn't hear The Secret, because they're trying to describe the law of attraction. But when that book was written 10 years ago, the average consciousness level of the planet was only here. So no one could articulate it any better than that. The collective consciousness now is here. So we're accessing higher frequency so it can be communicated differently because the law of attraction starts with the frequency of you or your frame, holding yourself in alignment with what you want. You'll start thinking different thoughts. The different thoughts will create a different mindset, different desires, different actions, and then you start creating different things. So this new way of operating is So much easier than everyone thinks it is. Everybody's get caught up in the complexity, but it's super simple because what's actually happening is people are having a reaction to their present moment. I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. So they're starting to take action from place of I don't want that instead of I have that. That's
Mhm.
all it is. So if you just hold yourself in alignment with what you want, you'll get everything you want.
I'm just shaking my head yes, because I agree with it all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you're
it's
right, I
so
have
simple.
experienced it. Yeah, and it's amazing because as I start going through my journey for the last 6 or 7 months, and I've been doing your Monday morning resets since I think since October,
Mhm.
November. So when I do those, yes, I can see it's like, okay, when I get into alignment, then those things start falling into place. And it does, it removes those roadblocks and makes things easier. So I absolutely love that. There are lots of quotes from the book that I love. One of them is big targets are not impossible. They are simply uncommon because they are unconventional. An
Yeah.
impossible target can be attainable and enjoyable when we shift to a higher frequency that is aligned with expanding capability with ease and flow. So, I know that there are probably some people out there hearing this for the first time and thinking, I can't think of a big target or I don't know how to get there. What would you say to somebody who can't think of a big target or doesn't know how to get there?
Well, the first thing I would say is like, do you want to hit a target, big target? Do you believe it's possible? Now, they most likely would probably say 70% yes. So they may say no. Like, do you want to believe it's possible? I do want to believe it's possible. Because the first thing that has to happen for any new reality to unfold is you have to believe it's possible. So a lot of times you have to unwind a little bit of old perspectives there to get that possible. So number one, okay, so do you believe that it's possible? I not 100%, but I want to. Okay, so you want to believe it's possible to hit an impossible target. Okay, can you believe that you can figure out do you want to believe that you can figure out how to hit an impossible target? Yes, I would like to believe I can figure out. Okay. Then what if you decided to not stop what you're doing until you believe it?
Okay.
So we leverage a lot of times it's getting clarity on where the misalignment is and the mind's trying to because basically they're giving you all of their old perspectives that don't align with the new one.
Okay. That makes
They're giving,
sense.
so I'm saying here do this and they're like, well, I don't and they're matching I'm giving them a formula and they're comparing it to their past and they're like it doesn't match. So I'm like, do you want it to match? Yes. Okay. So belief is the first part. That's the first part.
Yeah.
And sometimes believing it's the hardest part. And I've gotten very skilled at asking questions in a very specific syntax that bring that belief into awareness, such as, okay, what percentage of you believes that? Well, I believe it's 70% and I don't believe it 30%. So that what that means is you have a contradiction in beliefs because human beings only believe things 0% or 100%. So if you feel like you're believing something between 0 and 100%, that means you have a secondary belief that contradicts it.
Okay. That makes
So
sense.
basically what I'm doing is I'm unwinding the belief contradictions so the choice they want is clear and unblocked.
That goes back to the mastery of the English language, doesn't it?
Part of it, yeah. Yeah.
How you
Yeah.
ask that question, because it's not normal for somebody to say, "Well, I believe I can attain that 70%." That's
Yeah.
not where the brain goes. It's either black or white. I believe I can do it or
Yeah.
I can't. So it's one or the other.
Yeah.
But when you ask it, what's your percentage? What part of you believes, how much of you believes that you can do that? That shifts the person's awareness to the thing that they're trying to attain.
And that move because they're at a level where what do you mean I can't yet what percentage they're in like I believe it here. I don't believe
Right.
it. And I'm at this frequency up here going, well, there's contra I can see that level from looking downward. So that
Mhm.
question brings them up to here.
Makes sense.
So I consistently use questions that elevate their viewpoint that remove the previous contradictions.
Yep, makes sense. Perfect sense. Yeah, because then it turns something that is impossible into something that's possible when you remove that which is blocking them. And then that goes back to the past, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Where those limiting beliefs are that people hold on to in the past that they try and wield those as, well, wait a minute, this happened in the past. So they don't let go of that small little probability. Like they're holding on to that probability that that bad thing that happened in the past is going to be repeated again in the future And what you have said is
Yeah.
that, wait a minute, the past is in the past. It's dictated where we are in the present, but it doesn't
Yeah,
determine our
they're
future.
holding on to it usually because they don't know how to let go of it.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. You also talk about social conditioning in your book and life experiences. Do you want to touch on that? Because your book goes quite a bit into it. Why is it important to recognize it?
Well, because you can do what we have two sources of information, right? We have our brain and we have our gut, and those two are contradicting each other. And your brain is a collection of experiences based on everything that's happened in your life prior to now. So your brain is trying to keep you alive, not trying to make you wealthy and free and all that stuff. Your brain is trying to keep you from dying. So it's basically comparing every next step that you do to every step you've taken prior to now. So that's your conditioning. Your conditioning is every thought and experience and belief you've had that was created by your environment, your schools, your jobs, your family, your friends, all of that. And if you follow your condition, you will end up being the average of all of that. If you don't want to be average, you got to go your own way. And to go your own way, you got to follow your heart, your gut, your intuition. And when you start following that direction, that's when you'll have the most amazing, most challenging, most difficult, most rewarding path.
Mm.
Is when you follow your own, dance to your own tune. That's where the magic happens. But most people struggle with that because a lot of times it contradicts your social conditioning and your best practices.
Yeah, that makes sense because the social conditioning says stay comfortable. And like you said, your body says stay comfortable. Makes complete sense. And I can see where coaching would come in it that would help people with that. How do you view adversity?
It's just part of the process. It's just it's often the it's often the process. People a lot of times will think that they need to solve it, hit success for the problem to go away. But success comes when you solve the problem. The problem is part of the process. Like that is the process because the adversity that's in front of you is there to grow you into the frequency version of you that has the result.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to come up with a comment because it's just I love what you say. I love what you do. What
Okay.
advice would you give your kids today that you wish was available to you when you were younger?
What advice? I don't know. I give them all the advice, but and I think maybe what we do is the advice. I guess the best thing I could say is that the focus and importance on emotional health and balance is that's the most important thing. Because if you can learn to live in emotional alignment with life, life will be amazing. Most people sacrifice that for success and other things and try to get it everywhere. But if you start with there, everything will come much easier.
Mhm. I worked in the school system. I
Mhm.
don't think that's out there for the general public to
It's not.
embrace.
It
Yeah,
is not at
it's
all.
not. Maybe that's your next iteration.
That's more my wife's department. Alexis is the educator, not me.
There we
She does
go.
what I do, but with kids. But that's why we bounced around between private schools and startup schools because we were trying to create the right environment for them.
Mhm. Yeah, I homeschooled. That
Yeah.
was my to create the right environment for my kids, so I get that. I get that. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on that I didn't ask?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Nope.
That's fine because 'cause we're coming to a close. From your story, what's something that my listeners can do today that would help them change their tomorrow? What advice do you wanna leave us with?
I'd say believe you can. Believing you can may be the hardest part. And Les Brown once said, I don't know if you know Les Brown. Les Brown's
Mm-mm.
a speaker, Les Brown. He once said, the easiest thing I've ever done is make $1 million.
Mm.
The hardest thing I ever did was believe I could. Believe it and watch what happens.
I think that's the common theme. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Jason, thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for taking your time to be here. I just enjoyed it immensely. How can people reach out to you?
You can go to jasondreescoaching.com or you can go to mondaymindsetreset.com to join my Monday Mindset Reset call. That's a great place to start my free weekly alignment call.
Thank you so much. Just I really enjoyed this. I hope you had a blast too.
Yeah, no, it was great. Great job interviewing. I had some better questions and they got me thinking a little bit. So nice to be here.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Bye bye.
I want to thank you for watching or listening to my podcast. I value your time with me because I realize you could be listening to someone else right now. And I also want you to know that I now offer coaching and consulting. So if you're thinking about creating a course but not sure how to structure it, or you have a small step you need to take to lead to a big result, but you're not sure what the in-between looks like, check out my website at www.suesaller.com for more information and to request a free consultation. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps and make today awesome, friends. God bless.